Broadcasting live from the relative safety of the luxury suite on Kylum. It's TapTapConcede. Hello and welcome to TapTapConcede. This week we're talking about what we think about new Phyrexia, the draft format specifically, and perhaps the plane's a bit of a giveaway to how our record's been. But joining me this week is me, Kathleen, and...
Hi, I'm Nelson.
And... Cameron! Hooray! So we're all here to weigh in on what we think. So basically, before we get started on any of that, though, I have to thank what we think. I have to tell you what we think about our wonderful sponsors, CardKingdom.com. CardKingdom.com is a veritable kingdom of cards. It's a tautology of sealed product. Drat. What starts with T and is about magic. Tokens.
Time wasters, maybe?
Anyhow, go if you want to order some singles anywhere in the world or sealed product somewhere in the Americas. Well, America. You can do so by going to cardkingdom.com and using our affiliate code, which is /LRR. And you say, loading ready run sent me, button please. You get a button that says a pox upon the auto tapper. And so that's if you need any singles from a union shipped shop. So that's kind of fun. And also things that are fun is that you support us through our Patreon. And I'm looking at the wrong cameras. I do this again.
So much fun.
I really appreciate that you pay me to be mediocre at introducing these podcasts, and also James to be running the board, and Cameron and Nelson to be here, and the lights on, and the insurance, and all of those things that you need to do. And we really appreciate your support. So, and if you aren't supporting on Patreon, you could just tell your friends and listen in and enjoy or comment in the YouTube comments below. All of that is also great. Thanks for your engagement. All right. With that out of the way, it's time to get to one. I personally have not had good luck in this format, so I'm going to weigh in from any of my thoughts, and I'm just going to pick your guys' brains. But I did ask Graham for his insight, and his insight was blue is not bad. Although some people thought blue was bad. I think the Limited Resources podcast was a meh on blue or something that may have shifted some opinions. It certainly doesn't look immediately as powerful and impactful as the other colors. The first poison counter is real important, and you need a turn 2 play.
Yeah, I think my overall impression on it is if you are going to do the turn 1 tap land, turn 2 Prophetic Prism, turn 3 Phyrexian Atlas, your turn 4 better be good.
Yeah, I think you need like multiple spells on turn 4 if that's your plan, probably.
Yeah, and as someone who loves dirtling around, it punishes you if you stumble, or if you don't really affect the board in the early turns. You are going to have a difficult time catching back up, because your opponent can quite easily do turn 1 Crawling Chorus. Turn to the Selesnya signpost uncommon.
Right, there's some sort of Phyrexian Lord for a green and a white, where your other toxic creatures get +1/+1.
Yeah, it anthems your toxic creatures.
Yeah.
And that is a beating. Although that also isn't a guarantee that you're going to have a good game, because I've definitely had that on the draw and faced that from my opponent on the play.
Okay.
Right? And at that point, I was just like, I'm dead. I'm dead. I am doing this exactly one turn behind my opponent. So I think a lot of this format comes down to actually the draft or the pool and your deck building, and being able to both punish the opponent when you have the initiative or press the initiative, and play a reactive game when you are on the draw. Also, don't miss your land drops.
Yeah, no, I want to agree with everything Cam said. Oh, no worries. So this format gets going really quick, and I think the Selesnya Toxic beatdown is kind of like the first good deck to look at to understand the shape of it. Crawling Chorus, a common 1-drop, supported by Slaughter Singer, or a variety of other friends in that kind of white aggro, maybe toxic plan. There's a 3/1 that can have indestructible once in white. That's sort of like the equivalent of the good the good Blade. They keep giving us some version of Blade Plus, and I like that one as well among 2-drops from white. And then other commons you'll tend to get kind of closed out with if you're playing a white deck can include Basilica Shepherd and Flensing Raptor. Thank you. Bladed Ambassador is who I'm thinking of. So the toxic cards and the oil cards and the proliferate cards all kind of like blend together to make an interesting sort of churning soup of beatdown in the white green deck at least.
Mm-hmm.
The oil cards do a bunch of different things, but one of the things they do well is kind of fit in with the toxic cards if you have some proliferate cards. Like the 3 abilities can all work together pretty well.
So it's less like I have an oil deck, I have a toxic deck, I have a deck proliferate. It's like just grab all of them if they're in your colors.
You absolutely can do that. Like there's like the last deck that Adam drafted during the very last few minutes of the Fam Jam. I think he only got 1 game in before we said goodnight last night. He was just blue-red oil, and you can absolutely take that. And like both the toxic and the oil decks want to have proliferate, but another thing we noticed was just that most decks will have like at least 1 toxic card in them because, you know, the nature of that ability and the way that they've assigned it in terms of like the power of the cards. Like let's look at the common. I'm sorry, I can't remember any of the names of the cards, James. There's a common green 5 mana 4/4 haste.
Oh, it's the.
So that's one
and
you'll
it's
see.
got toxic 3.
Tyranax Atrocity. I found it in my list here. So Tyranax Atrocity is a pretty good example. Like it doesn't have trample. It has toxic 3 and it has haste, but it's a 5 mana 4/4 haste. So in green at common, that's like already a pretty good rate. If it didn't have toxic, you would still play this card a fair bit. So even if you're like ignore the toxic ability on a bunch of these creatures, they still make for like fine inclusions in your damaged based win plan.
Yeah, I have also noticed that a 4/4, 4 is the real magic number on this board. Most things are like the really like big roadblocks that are hard to attack around tend to be like 2 4s.
Right.
And stuff. So 4 is like, oh, I'm going to eat your big thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of like kind of the shape of the combat is there's like some 2s and then some 3s and then some 4s. And then after that, there's fewer creatures, I think, that you're seeing play regularly that are bigger than 4. I did play the Spider. There's this hilarious 6 mana 6/5 reach trample. I can't remember the name of that one either, but that was another good common that I liked.
Yeah,
and every now and then you'll have a game where you just play this 6-drop if you've been behind. You know, your opponent starts with 1-drops and stuff, and then you're down at 5 life. But then if you just have an X5, sometimes they just stop attacking. And so that's nice. And always the play that I'm looking to be in. Like I prefer to be the like slower player in most draft environments. And so my first draft, I got really run over and had to learn, you know, don't play a deck with a low number of 2-drops pretty quickly. Along with Crawling Course, let's keep talking about the 1-drops of the format. So red has several. The first kind of most interesting one I want to talk about is Exuberant Fuseling. So this is another card that uses oil counters. It's a 1 red mana for a 0/1 trample and +1/+0 for each oil counter on it, but it gets an oil counter whenever it enters the battlefield and whenever another creature artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield. So it's nice on turn 1 because it like stands a chance of attacking turn 2, and then it doesn't get to attack for several turns, but then eventually it's a 5/1 trample, and so the rest of your game plan might support it. You know, this is the ideal scenario. Obviously, it's like kind of a bad top deck. Although with trample plus a pump spell, you can do something. Just being part of your set of 1-drops to get your attacking plan going, I think it turns out it's worth playing. When I first saw it, I was like, well, this card's real bad. Don't play this. And then I had to like lose to it. So then after doing that once, I was like, okay, Exuberant Fuseling, I see you. But I think the truth is just like any of these 1-drops, like, you know, as long as your deck has 1 or 2 of them even, then you stand a chance of having the most beautiful curve out.
This is the red Necrosquito, which is also a card that people kept telling me was good, but I think you have to be more in a way to get oil to make that card
The
good.
Necrosquito, let's talk about that one too. So that's a 4-drop in black, an uncommon 3 in a black for, it's like a 2/2 flying. It enters with 2 oil counters and gets +1/+1 for each oil counter. But whenever another creature artifact you control it dies, you know, it gets another oil counter, just like the Fuseling. So like you were saying. So this one, ideally you can play it on 4 and then like force some trades. And it just gets to hang back, and then eventually, if you can just turn it into a 3/3 or 4/4 flying, even usually you can win a game of limited with just that. Whereas the Exuberant Fuseling doesn't really get to attack twice after turn 1. Like if it might get to attack on turn 2, and then it can attack every time you have a pump spell. But yeah, the comparison is solid.
All right, back to 1-drop. Sorry,
That's
I was
okay.
like, wait a minute, that's the same card but different.
So there's like 2 more 1-drops in red. There's a Goblin that's a little bit like a gutter snipe, or they've been making them more at 2 mana lately. The archers, where every time you cast a non-creature spell, you can ping your opponents.
It's Thermo Alchemist.
Thermo Alchemist,
but
yeah.
without 3.
Or Kessig Flame Breather, yeah. So they have a 1-drop now, where it's a 1/1 haste. I'm sorry, this one I don't know the name of, James. It's a 1/1 haste, and then it comes in with an oil counter, and you can pay 1 and tap it and remove an oil counter to deal 1 damage to your opponent.
Sawblade Scamp.
Sawblade Scamp, exactly.
Right.
Oh, sorry, it doesn't come down with an oil counter.
No, it
But
doesn't.
you
It's
get
very slow.
You get an oil counter whenever you cast a non-creature spell. Oh, and it doesn't cost a mana. Sorry. Anyway, so it just taps to deal 1 to each opponent. That's kind of nice as a target. But you also it's on a 1/1 haste, like it is a Raging Goblin. So again, does something on turn 1, can attack every time that you have a pump spell, and offers you some edge in the late game.
Right. So 1-drops are good in this format, is what I'm hearing. You want like a couple of them at least.
Well, it's just the 1-drops. I think the truth is that the 1-drops are a bit better because kind of the 2 and 3 drops are so solid. Like, you don't really want to have a plan of doing tap land, divination. Okay, I'll play magic on turn 4. Like, you really want to have a plan of playing a 2-drop and playing a 3-drop, or playing like on 3 you're playing a pump spell and a 1-drop. Like, that's because of like, let's talk about Titanic growth, right? Like, this is a reprint, but it's kind of, I don't know, I think it's living its best life in this format. So 1 and a green for +4/+4 at instant speed actually gets played sometimes in like, it's sort of like the budget solution to if you can't get enough Might of Old Croesus. Like, I've sent people into battle at F&M playing Infect with this card because it's like, okay, we're sold out of Groundswells, but I can sell you this. It's only 10 cents. It's 1 more mana, but it still does 4 poison. And, this is just exactly what it looks like. It's like worse than Giant Growth most of the time, but it's, you're saying 4 is that magic number. And so, like, as long as you have even 1 more toughness than them to begin with, this is going to take out a creature. It's like a green Doomblade. And I think the existence of this thing plus the red one, in red you can get now I don't have this card memorized, it's not a reprint, but it's +3/+1, and then you also kind of draw a card, like you exile the top card of your library and you can play it until the end of, I think, your next turn, which is like, that's pretty powerful. That's not like this turn. Thank you, Blazing Crescendo. So the +1 toughness on this one, that to me is almost the most egregious part, right? Like, you're going to replace itself. You might be casting on turn 2 and then you flip a 4-drop, but if you flip a land, that can just be your land drop for next turn. So you can have played a land already and then Blazing Crescendo, and then next turn you play the land off the Blazing Crescendo. Otherwise, hopefully you can cast whatever spell it is. But yeah, you get an extra toughness, which is not quite as good as First Strike, but still maybe ends up resulting in the same trades.
Well, you mentioned 1-drops being good, and we talk about like, the X1, and 1-drops are good, and there's a lot of things with 1 toughness in this format.
Right.
Like, it's very easy to suddenly change combat math if you're not trading an X1 for an X1, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that might bring us around to the removal even at this point. Although there is one more 1-drop that I wanted to talk about, which is the black one with Toxic 1 and Death Touch.
Yes, and Death Touch.
Something like
Skull Dweller?
Skull Dweller.
Bilious Skull Dweller.
Bilious Skull Dweller.
I had 2 in my pre-release pool.
It does have a gross name.
Good card. I mean, it's an uncommon, so hopefully it will be in limited, but yeah, dropping one of these on 1 is a statement.
Yeah, it does the same work that Crawling Chorus does in the early turns, getting your opponent's first poison counter on them, maybe another one, and then obviously offers to just like sit there and trade against whatever your opponent does, a la Typhoid Rats. Really solid card. Actually, I don't know. I'm not sure if this will end up in any constructed homes, but it seems like enough words on a card that I'd be like, yeah, I play this in constructed.
Yeah, I can sleeve this one up.
Yeah, it seems fine. Also, for 1 black mana in common, this is the kind of card I would normally just put aside and like not consider. But Whispers of the Dross, for 1 black mana instant, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn.
And proliferate. It
And
seems
you
good.
Also get to proliferate. So like, there's a bunch of ways to proliferate for 1 mana in this set, which is kind of new and exciting. And this doesn't put a counter on it, so it's not like a black shock or anything. It doesn't do 2 points of toughness subtraction. It's just that 1 point of toughness subtraction is pretty good in this environment. So
Yeah, maybe they've blocked a 3/3 with their pesky 2/4, and you get to get them.
exactly. Yeah. No, I love that. Or they get to get you because you attacked a 3/3 and their
Yeah.
Either way,
Yeah.
there's plenty of that. Plus, like just a bunch of the creatures that you might lose the game to, especially in the early turns or whatever. Like just 1 toughness. I saw a lot of.
There's a
go ahead.
there's a 3/1 green creature that's with Toxic 2.
Toxic 2.
That's really like, God, you have to get rid of that.
Toxic 2 is a fast clock, right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's an elf. Yeah, Branchlight Stalker.
Thank you. Yeah.
Honestly, just a very pretty card, too.
Yes.
Best looking blade in some time.
Yeah, no, it's very handsome. Green has a bunch of creatures with more toxic than they should. We brought up the haste one earlier. There's also an uncommon that was fairly popular. Everyone was grabbing. It's got, again, some kind of gross name, but it's a 4/4 for 4 with toxic 3. And when it ETBs, you can pay 2 to proliferate.
Right.
So it's an optional
Right.
proliferate. You'll have to have 6 mana at 1 shot. Thank you. Venomous Brutalizer.
I drafted this and then I never drew it in any of my games and got stomped.
I haven't gotten to cast it yet either. 4/4 for 4 toxic 3. To me, doesn't seem a whole lot better, but I guess is like
It's the same card that we liked before, but it's 1 mana cheaper. And
I know, but it doesn't have haste, so it just still does the toxic 3 and the attack in the same turn, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it blocks as a 4/4, but then the option to pay 2 to proliferate, that's pretty hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, it's a live draw late game, right? If you've got your opponent to Toxic 9.
Yeah,
9 poison
exactly.
counters.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just having a whole bunch of proliferate cards in your deck is a lot easier in this format, I think, than it was in New Phyrexia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, we can talk about removal.
Yeah, let's
I
talk
think.
about removal more.
Yeah. There's a lot of it.
There is
and
a lot of
it's-
removal. Yep.
It is okay, in my opinion, but there is a lot of it. Right? There's the black removal spell that is 1 black and costs 3 extra.
Okay, yeah.
Or sacrifices a creature.
Right.
Annihilating
Eaten
Glare.
Alive. Thank you, Annihilating Glare.
Or yes, 4 extra, excuse me.
Common black, 5 mana, kill whatever you want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this can come down kind of late, right? Like, you can be in some real trouble by turn 5 if you've hit all your land drops and are lucky enough to be playing this on curve without having to sack a creature. It gets its man, but I don't know, right? Like you sleeve these up.
Yeah, it's playable, for sure.
Yeah, it's playable, but I'm not sure it feels great.
There's not like a ton of free creatures and artifacts lying around. You know, every deck doesn't have like a spare Ichor Wellspring or something that it wants to sacrifice, but your mites don't always do anything.
Yes, yeah.
Or, you know, just in the middle game, because you're playing 1-drops, even 2-for-1ing yourself, like a legit 2-for-1, sometimes is going to be fine if you've been kind of toe-to-toe with your opponent and then they have some flyer you need to deal with. The other sort of black common removal, it's kind of surprising to me this one was a common. It's the Smother reprint, Anoint with Affliction.
Oh, this card's so good.
Yeah,
this
it's
card gets a
common.
lot of good stuff because you're like, oh, only mana 3 or less. It's like, that's so many good draws, though.
Yeah. So, yeah, exile target creature if it has mana value 3 or less. Pretty intense upgrade on Smother, honestly, and a common. And Corrupted, exile that creature instead of its controller has 3 or more poison counters. And, yeah, it's an instant for 1 and 1 black, 2 mana. So this is like, you can just kind of pad your deck with these if you get them, and that sort of shores up your early game plan against everybody.
Yes. Yeah,
It's
I
an
like this a
instant.
lot.
Yeah, it kills all the early stuff, and then most decks will have some toxic, so later on it just is like, you know, unchecked removal, right? So this one's very good.
Actually, is this a cycle of 2 mana instants with a corrupted clause?
Ooh.
Because I also wanted to talk about Bring the Ending,
Okay.
which is 1 and a blue for it's miscalc.
Okay, right.
But with a set mechanic.
Right.
So bring the ending, 1 and a blue instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. And corrupted, that spell is countered if the opponent has 3 or more counters.
Right, counter any spell.
Counter any spell.
Yeah.
I honestly like this.
Yeah, seems
blue,
fine for the limited environment.
People were saying that blue was weak in limited, and I don't know, being able to say no to your opponent's 2-drop, if you are, on the play,
Right.
is powerful, right? It can really wrong foot your opponent. It can throw off a lot of game plans. And then also just being able to get rid of their late game plays, because back when I came back to Magic, Mana Leak was big because it got your opponent's 2-drop, or it also got their Titan, right? Which they were trying to play on curve. I don't know. I think there is a very good functional blue deck in this format.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not putting blue at the bottom of the ranking or anything. Or if I did, it's close so far. The other counterspell that has a interesting clause, it's not the corrupted clause, but there's a cancel variant. I don't remember the name, sorry, but it's 1 and 2 blue for counter target spell. If its mana value was 3 or less, proliferate. So interesting use of playing with the design space of countering earlier late plays. Right. Thank you, James. Reject imperfection. So I had this in the deck yesterday, and it was kind of neat. Like sometimes you'll just fire it off against a spell that might, because you're not usually playing too many cancels in a deck. Like I just had this one counter spell in my whole deck, and sometimes you had it and you're like, okay, I'm just going to make sure there isn't another bomb on the other opponent's side, and I'm going to hold my advantage and chip away and win this game over the course of 5 turns or something. And other times you're like, okay, they're just playing a bear that doesn't really do anything, but I really want to proliferate right now. Like I'm going to proliferate like 4 oil counters and your poison. I have corrupted now, and like I'm going to draw 2 off of this 6-drop. I might as well mention that one now. And then let's go back to talking about the removal. But the in my plays yesterday often involved proliferating this jellyfish. There's some sort of Gummazoa or Esperzoa.
Yeah, Esperzoa, something like that.
Yeah. So there's a 6 mana 4/4 flying. It's 6 mana. So you're not gonna play this in every deck, but it's a 4/4 flying Phyrexian jellyfish. Thank you. Watchful Blisterzoa. And yeah, it comes in with an oil counter, and when it dies, you draw cards equal to the number of oil counters on it. So this is kind of like one of the cutest sort of proliferate targets, where you're actually just proliferating cards drawn, unless they exile it with all the things that do that, or just tap it down. There's a bunch of ways to stop the Blisterzoa from drawing them cards, but we'll talk about that later. I guess we could segue back into blue removal. I actually really like this one. You just get a free proliferate on what is it, dehydration or trapped in the floorboards or whatever. Like 1 blue for enchant creature. When this enters the battlefield, tap the creature.
Mesmerizing Dose. Thank you.
Mesmerizing Dose. What is the first one of these? Can anyone remember?
Encrust?
Encrust, maybe? Yeah, that sounds right. There was a card from like the 90s called Dehydration, but it was 4 mana. They started always making this 3 mana and tacking on the tap enchanted creature thing. And I feel like it was in...
It was in like M something.
Maybe, yeah, but it was also in Innistrad. There was something in Innistrad that was like a creepy version. But yeah, Encrust. See, Encrust doesn't tap it.
Right.
But it does say its activated abilities can't be activated, which is neat. That's different.
Yeah, I actually play Encrust in my Pauper Commander deck.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, because it stops like various weird activated abilities, I guess.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's almost more important than untapping a creature in Commander, honestly.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. But I mean, this seems like a design space that they really are comfortable with.
Yeah. It's like this card is like never seen constructed play, and generally isn't even a really high pick, because sometimes there's like a 1 blue mana removal spell that's similar, or like just shrinks the toughness, and people prefer that one or whatever. So anyways, I had a good time with Mesmerizing Dose, where you just get to take out a creature and then proliferate for free.
I had an opponent with 3 of those.
Okay.
Brutal.
And but the problem is, what I found, I won that game even though they had 3.
Sure.
Is because a lot of my creatures still did things. Right.
Oh, I see.
Like you have like the plague nurses and the green black things.
See,
that
this
have
one doesn't
activated
stop activated abilities.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's vaguely annoying, but
You can mesmerizing dose my Shattergang brothers all you want. I'll just
Yeah.
still keep blowing up your stuff.
Yeah, I think at one point I got my Slaughter Singer mesmerizing dosed,
Oh, okay.
which,
Doesn't do much, yeah.
yeah, I would have preferred it that it wasn't, but it didn't completely shut down the card.
yeah.
Also, there is a lot of sacrifice in this set.
Okay, I haven't run into a ton of it, yeah, but
I mean,
it exists.
There's
It
a
exists.
there's a common black creature
There's a
that you
com-
can
there's a
do a
2/2.
free sacrifice.
Yeah. it has-
and then the
right.
the black removal spell.
Oh, right, the one you showed us earlier.
Yeah,
right, the one black mana one. Okay.
So this works, but there's counterplay for it, right?
Yeah.
This creature still exists, and it can be used as an asset.
Yeah, mesmerizing dose. I'm not saying is a bomb or even a first pick or anything. It's just I don't know. It's part of the power creep or whatever, but not at the same time. Like there weren't a lot of proliferate cards that made it in any constructed decks from New Phyrexia, right? Or the whole Scars of Mirrodin block. Like maybe a little bit in the standard environment back then, but not a ton. And none that have like really shown the test of time to stand up to like 2020 designed cards. And so now they just have proliferate for cheap or free a bunch and. It's nice to see because, like, if you put it on a card like Mesmerizing Dose that's otherwise pretty uninspiring, then suddenly you kind of feel like you're getting something back out of your late picks and gluing your deck together. So I like that about it. Another proliferate removal spell that's actually a good card. I think it's called Drown in Ichor. Or
Yes.
Ichor.
That card is very good.
Yeah, it's sort of like a mesmerizing dose, but if it worked out. 1 and a black for a sorcery. Target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn and proliferate. You get so much more for that 1 extra mana. It's just a Whispers of the Dross for 4.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing. Although it's a sorcery, so I guess Whispers of the Dross is a little better than this card. Turns out, weird. Yeah.
I don't know. I this card is like I think if you're in black, this is like probably first pickable because like
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
like if you're already in black, right?
Yeah, I don't
and
know
you're
if
like-
it's pack 1, pick 1, but
No.
it could be 2, honestly. And some packs I might take the Drown in Ichor before anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're already in black, this is a very highly rated card. You want as many of these as you can get your hands on, I think. But I mean, that's it's premium removal.
Yeah.
2 mana. But like I do find that there's a lot of removal in this format in general, right? Things are trading, things are going back and forth. I found that like when I was playing yesterday while we're on the removal chat, it just seems like I would be like, okay, my opponent's got a creature and I've got more creatures, and then like, but they were just like every time my opponent had the answer is like how I felt like I had lots of stuff being like removed or like combat tricked or just killed outright, right?
Yeah, I think that's maybe just the total number of removal spells or whatever in this set. You're going to have lots of games where it's like you play a thing, they kill it. You play a thing, they kill it. You play a thing, they kill it. Or worse, they play a thing, you play a thing.
They kill your thing.
They kill your thing and attack with the first thing, and then you
Yeah.
just keep doing that,
Yeah,
every
and-
turn until you lose to Toxic.
Yeah, and it feels like it's very hard to sort of recover from that tempo play. Tempo play is important in this format.
Yeah, the 1-drops are good. The 1-drop removal spells are good. 2-drops obviously also very good.
Yeah, and in a format where there's this much removal, I found that I actually really wound up liking the black Skull Bomb. The draw
Yeah.
Skull Bomb, is it?
Yeah.
Like just an unearth effect. Or a disentomb?
It's Raised Dead, yeah.
Raised Dead. Raised
Yeah,
Dead.
3 mana Raised Dead plus you draw a card and then 1 more mana, draw a Skull Bomb to cast it. So, yeah, I like all these Skull Bombs, even just cycling them for 2 mana just to smooth your draw out, ensure your land drops.
Maybe get some value off sacrificing an artifact.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, put another counter on your Fuseling possibly.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Or just the other thing you can do with them is you can play them early, let your opponent try to figure out, how you having access to the Skull Bomb ability affects their plays. They spend a little bit of mental energy, and then at the end of turn 4 or whatever, you're like, okay, this is a card. you know, it's like I don't need to Raise Dead. Yeah, I'm really really big fan of this one. Also, back on the removal side, the blue one, Serum Spell Bomb.
Surgical spell bomb.
Surgical Spell Bomb, really hot. 3 mana, unsummon any creature, only at sorcery, but
Yeah.
and draw a card. This thing is wild. Like
This thing sucks
Yeah.
to play
I mean,
against because you're like, oh no, now I have no good blocks.
right.
Well, it's kind of like Into the Royal.
Yeah, well,
Right?
it's funny though that in Into the Royal where you only have to spend the first mana for the opponent to know that you're going to into the Royal them, and it's like then that kind of like shapes the game or like affects the way they play, or maybe just like they get to know that they're dead a turn early. So you just like we have some surgical skull bombs in play sometimes, and then your opponent concedes like that was early, wasn't it? And then you maybe examine the board again. It's like, oh no,
Yeah,
oh, right.
they were just dead on board.
Oh right, yeah, and those are the funniest concessions to get, and I'm still not I'm not so good at the game, definitely still, that it doesn't still just happen to me regularly where my opponent has done the math and knows that like I have lethal, but I haven't been thinking about that. I've just been thinking about like how I'm going to deal with their creatures, and sure, the Skull Bomb keeps something off the board for one turn, but I don't always process as quickly as my opponent that like, yeah, you only need one turn of your opponent's creatures not being there to attack them to death.
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely had the games where, you draw a lightning bolt off the top and you think, okay, well, right, I can this lets me swing in this turn because I can trade off and then lightning bolt their blocker, and then, next turn I might be able to get in for lethal. Meanwhile, they're at 3 life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Classic. Red has a shock that's
The 3
one
mana
proliferate.
shock.
There's that one too. It's got the 3 mana. That one does 3 damage.
Oh yeah.
It's got Volt Charges back. Actually.
Yes,
Volt Charge is a
Charge was-
reprint.
Yeah, from New Phyrexia.
Yeah,
It was-
exactly.
There was a cycle of these, or
Oh, maybe, yeah. Just like
I just
instants that proliferate or something.
I remember the black one, which was to give 2 -1/-1 counters to something and then proliferate, or 1 -1/-1 counter, I think, which I loved.
Yeah.
I love that card. But yeah, the return of Volt Charge, I was very happy to see.
Yeah.
Magmatic Slash is the 1-drop.
Right. I was going to say, so it deals 2 damage to a creature, but 4 damage if the creature had toxic.
Yes.
So
Or
this
Hex Cold Slash.
Hex Gold Slash, exactly. This is like the theme of the Mirrans kind of like fighting still against the Phyrexians. They're few in number at this point, but there's still some holdouts.
Yeah, all the absolute. Everybody in this movie is like, or everybody left is like in a Predator movie essentially at this point. But all of the weak people have already been killed off. This is an entire crew of like, Arnie's and stuff like that.
Just the most badass members left from the original population of this already pretty harsh climate, right? Like Mirrodin.
Yeah, Mirrodin was not a pleasant place to live.
like-
I want to say
The first Mirrodin set back in 2004 or something. It's like there's just monsters and really hardened humans and wizards that live here.
Yeah, exactly.
And robots, obviously.
Yeah, it's like the Quicksilver Sea wasn't an especially less toxic place than
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
like oh, what happened to Dave? Oh, heavy metal poisoning, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like everybody who already lived on Mirrodin was like much further along the Mad Max end of the spectrum
Yes.
than the average citizens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like that a lot. That
Yeah.
Mirrodin started off as kind of like, what if Mad Max, but there was no leather? It was just metal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might have been from a design notes file. Who knows?
Yeah, it's like, what if Dark Sun was less pleasant?
Oh. Yeah, so anyways, Hex Cold Slash showing off one of, Jorkadine's cadre taking out a Phyrexian. And yeah, Jorkadine just leading the absolute, toughest of the tough that are left there. But
Great
this,
artwork too.
yeah, it's just, this is one of the ones to be aware of because it's 1 mana. Often there's a shock in the format. This one will take out almost all of the toxic creatures. And then green has like Dragon Punch or Bear Punch is back. Ruthless Predation, a common.
Yeah, it's +1/+2, and then target
fight.
creature deals damage.
This one's a fight,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
There's
also
also the-
has a bite. Yeah, at
Yeah.
uncommon you can get a punch instead of a fight. So it's just make sure you're aware of that. This mostly only matters if you're the green player. But yeah, at common you can get a sorcery speed fight, meaning they both deal damage. And then at uncommon, I can't remember
There's
what
a
it's called. I think it has
It's-
bite in the name.
Yeah,
It might be a reprint even.
No,
But
it's
there's-
like necrotic bite or something like that.
Yeah, anyway, for 1 and a green at instant, you can just get your creature deals damage to their creature, but it doesn't improve their stats.
There's also a common green Death Touch
Infectious
creature
Oh, okay.
with
yeah.
his which is
Thank you, Infectious Bite.
good with both of these cards. It's like
Oh, okay.
1/3 toxic 1.
The Basilisk.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Ichor
yes.
Spit Basilisk.
3 mana, 1/3, Death Touch, Toxic 1, right?
I'm like, at first I was like, ugh. And then I ran it a couple times. I was like, you know what? This card kind of gets it done.
It looks like a spider, right? You see 3 mana, 1/3, and then Death Touch, and you think the next ability is going to be Reach. But no, it's just decent at attacking and great at blocking.
Yeah.
It doesn't have Reach. There is a spider, however, another 1/3 in common and green.
Copper Longlegs.
Yeah, Copper Longlegs. For only 2 mana, you can have a Phyrexian Spider 1/3 Reach with pay 2, sacrifice this, and proliferate. And then, if you see your opponent doing that or making a weird swing with it, it's probably because they're about to play the Nimraiser Paladin.
Right.
The next turn in black, there's a 5 mana 4/4 that brings back a creature with mana value. Is it 2 or less? It might be 3 or less.
3 or less.
3 or less. And
This
this
card's
also
very
has Toxic
good.
too. So that's a pretty common play pattern you'll see among the Golgari decks.
Yeah, Nimraiser Paladin was actually something I wanted to highlight again because, Raise Dead, I really enjoy. Like,
Yeah.
this is kind of like, we often see Gravediggers in limited environments, which are usually playable, but this one is good too. Like, this hits quite hard.
Yeah.
It's not going to bring back anything super exciting.
I mean, it can bring back a Flensing Raptor.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Black-white as good friends. I really like playing Black-white and Flensing Raptor. You mentioned that earlier as a sort of a powerful 3-drop.
Yeah, that's one of the ones we saw a lot. We saw a lot of Flensing Raptors and Basilica Shepherds during our run of the Fam Jam yesterday. And I wouldn't mind talking about both of them. These are white flyers at common. So Flensing Raptor is a 3 mana 2/2 flying with Toxic 1. And when it enters the battlefield, another target creature you control with Toxic gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn. So jumping, just helps your other toxic creatures get evasion. It doesn't pump them a whole lot, but what do you want? It's already just a Windrake.
You're possibly getting 2 poison counters onto them at that point, which is huge.
Yeah, like I think the dream here is Crawling Chorus into Slaughter Singer into Flensing Raptor.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, watch out for that. So then your Crawling Course is going to put 2 poison counters on them and like 4 damage or something, or is it? Oh, it's 3 damage, I guess, if you do that play pattern. And then after that, your Flensing Raptor will start attacking for 3 and Toxic 1. Yeah, pretty scary bird. Also, just obviously made of so many teeth. Speaking of, Basilica Shepherd, a little later down the curve. So it's 5 mana, so it's like, not the highest priority in draft. Got to make sure you shore up your low end first, I would say, in this format. But great at closing the game out. 3/3 flying for 5. Doesn't have Toxic, but when it ETBs, create 2 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might creatures with Toxic, and these can't block. So 3 bodies, 2 Toxic bodies for 5 mana, and just a pretty good 5-drop for an aggressive deck because just being able to have a bunch of bodies on the board helps close out those last points of damage.
And like sometimes you get into a situation where, your opponent might have, you have all of these mites. They have a lot of poison counters and they don't really want to take more. And then you might even trade a mite for a real card.
Yep.
I've seen it happen.
There's cards that make mites, but there's not a ton of other tokens running around. Oh, I will say actually at Uncommon, this is one of the things that makes tokens. It's a little slow, but it seems like almost all the ones that get opened in packs are getting played, so take that for what it's worth. Incubation Sac, 1 green mana artifact that comes in with 3 oil counters and pay 4, so that's a lot of mana, but still remove an oil counter from the sack to make a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. No Toxic, just a regular 3/3. So
The 3/3 is annoying.
yeah, a little 3/3 engine. I only got to cast this once in my deck that had it, and my opponent blew it up immediately before I could make a 3/3.
Wow.
So, it is a lot of mana. You can only do that at sorcery, but I still give this card a pass. Like you're probably gonna end up playing it.
It's 3 3/3s.
Exactly. It's
Eventually.
3/3s in a bag. Yes, you have to pay 13 mana for them, but like it's a bunch of 3/3s. So
it's 9 power and toughness.
it's got a plan for you to survive to get the rest of the 3/3s out. And then if you're proliferating, you probably end up in a situation often enough with this card where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna just keep making a 3/3 every turn.
Yeah.
Until
That's a
I've
lot.
got enough 3/3s to attack.
Yeah, because that can really shut down the board. I've seen it go off once, but
Yeah, no, it doesn't always work. Obviously, it's a lot of mana, but powerful effect. Yeah.
Speaking of powerful effects that I've seen go off a lot, there's a sorcery that makes a 3/3 toxic beast, and then if it has corrupted, so if they're corrupted, it has flashback.
Yeah,
So
Call of the Herd.
that
It's not called Call of the Herd, but
no, but that is a very good card. Speaking of 3/3 engines,
no, I like that one as well. And I had that one in the same deck as this. What's that one called?
sorry, James, we don't know.
Yeah.
Viral spawning.
Thank you, Viral Spawning. Yeah, we're really making James work today. So again, getting corrupted, not impossible. I don't know. It's like tough. It's tough to know how high up to rate the sort of 15th to 23rd cards that either have some kind of evasion and toxic but not great stats, because there's a couple of those, and then or the proliferate cards. So I still don't know entirely how to rate the corrupted cards, but most of them it's like, well, the front side without corrupted is still pretty good.
Yeah.
Like this is still a 3/3 for 3.
Yeah, I have not personally, like I had in my limited experience, have not found getting 3 poison counters on someone while I'm playing green to be particularly hard, because it has a lot of, and it's usually you're paired with white or black, which has evasive ways of getting poison counters on as well, right? So I have not won with poison, but getting 3 has not been like
Yeah. No, I want to
super
agree.
hard.
I want to say in my limited experience, well, only 2 drafts in, getting your first poison counter on your opponent is way harder than getting your third on, right? That seems to be the case. Speaking of 3/3s for 3 in green, you're going to see a lot of Contagious Vorak there. I found the card name, James. This is a common pig that's a 3/3 for 3 with an ETB that says, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a land from among them and put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, but if you didn't reveal a card this way, proliferate. So
It feels good either way. You
Elvish
get a land.
Visionary and Centaur Courser got together.
Yeah.
Like you get to draw land from the top 4 cards of your deck
Yeah.
on turn 3 and have a 3/3 blocker. Like,
Oh, it's so good. This card rules.
yeah. So
Even if you whiff, you're like, okay, that wasn't so bad.
yeah, I mean it draws a card, so it fits into the greedy, slow get to the late game deck. But it's a 3/3 for 3, so it fits into the like hit you with goblins beatdown deck.
Yeah, let me stay alive until I can get to the greedy late game deck.
Yeah. And obviously it can proliferate, so it fits into like the more hyper-toxic strategies if that's what you want to do, or if you're in an oil deck. This pig pretty much does it all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good pig.
Good pig. A+.
Do we want to talk about the Boros stack?
Sure, yeah.
I actually wasn't able to put it together, but I was sitting next to Adam as he did, and Adam just killed people over and over again.
Right.
I got killed by a Boros deck.
Yeah.
Was it lots of equipment?
I have relatively, I was killed by one once, and yeah, it was brief.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't know. I look forward to trying to play the Boros stack at some point because it seems good.
Yeah, I died to a Boros deck where my opponent could turn any of their creature into a 4/4 double strike. So I was like, oh, I'm dead. It took a while I was really hanging on because I was playing green, so I had a lot of big butts. But eventually I was like, no, we're over.
So we talked about some pump spells earlier. White, I believe, does also have 1 for 1 mana. Like I think there's a +2/+2 for 1 white with some other text. I can't remember what that one's called.
It is like it's the one with Elspeth and a Johnny fighting on it.
Okay.
And if the creature is toxic, you get to proliferate, I think.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's all right. Anyways, what matters is that like there's multiple double strikers in Boros.
Yes.
There's a white uncommon regular double striker with toxic 1 called Jawbone Duelist. This deck, I don't know if the Boros deck cares that much about the toxic, and you probably incidentally play some corrupted cards, but it's more used to winning with regular damage, I think. So there's this thing, and then there's also Bladehold War Whip, which is like the signpost uncommon.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called? Did I say it right? Is it Bladehold War Whip?
I don't know if it. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Like
Nicely
Hero of
done.
Bladehold.
Yeah. Well, I was more just thinking like Bladehold War Whip. Right? So this is a 3-mana 2/2 double strike with more abilities. It makes your other abilities cheaper. Sorry, it's not really that. If you're listening, it's 1 red-white for an artifact equipment with Mirrodin, which means when this enters the battlefield, you make a 2/2 and then attach this to it. So you cast it, you get a 2/2 for free for it coming into play, and then this gives the equipped creature double strike. It equips for 5, so after the Formiridan token dies or whatever, and you want to re-equip it, it does cost 5, but it makes other equip abilities cheaper by 1 generic mana. So that's cool. Yeah, so between this and Jawbone, you'll often have a double striker to put all of your other random equipments on. And yeah, you probably want to keep the curve low unless there's something that obviously synergizes, or maybe you play a Basilica Shepherd to get the extra bodies. But I'm not sure there's a ton of extra like kind of info about this deck other than it's good. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're going to run into this deck and it's going to do the things that you expect, like play those cheap removals we talked about earlier, play these double strike creatures, play a couple of pump spells, play a bunch of equipment. It's a fine strategy.
Yeah, no, it works very well.
Yeah.
If you have this, there's some bad equipment, like the Bardiche is like not good and stuff like that. Like the
Right.
one that's like a 5-drop.
Okay.
Like a 4/2 or something like that. It's like,
Yeah.
not great. But like the cheap equipment is good.
Yeah, so it's weird how good the like 2 mana +1 -1 one is. I can't remember what that's called.
Yeah, that one is
When-
good.
When I first analyzed that card, when I first looked at it, I'm like, oh, weird Skull Clamp. It's like Skull Clamp is still around, but doesn't do Skull Clamp things anymore because they're not allowed to. But actually, it's a Formiridan card. So this card is just a 3/1 for 2 that leaves behind an equipment that like maybe not all of the creatures in your deck can even use. But you have a bunch of equipment in your deck, so it's like another piece of equipment
Yeah.
that can slap onto something once you've got enough toughness on it.
Imagine putting that on a Basilica Shepherd.
Yeah, now you've got you're attacking for 4 in the air.
flyer. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's brutal.
Or if you need to, you can put your Phyrexian Mites into the Wood Chipper to put more oil counters on your Necrosquito.
True, I suppose.
That's probably not a very likely situation, but it's possible.
I mean, yeah.
Sorry, James, this is a red common for 1 and a red that we're talking about, and it has Formiridan.
Barbed Batterfist. That's
Barbed
it.
Batterfist.
Yeah, it's cheap and it's good.
You know, this tends to happen whenever there's a good Boros deck. Like in Call Time, there were a bunch of equipments that I thought, well, I mean, maybe I'm just still completely missing the boat in this, but I never really liked that treasure pick, whatever it was in Call Time, which is like 2 mana, attaches for 1, the creature gets +1/+1, and then they also, you get a treasure token whenever you deal damage with that creature to a player.
Yeah.
Remember this? And everybody else played that. And I played it in the Boros decks, but it's just sort of like when there's a good Boros deck, sometimes any piece of equipment, as long as the stats, the stat increases don't have to be much. In fact, this one offers you a stat increase net of 0. But if the equip costs are cheap, it turns out that those cards make the cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah, maybe this isn't really Skull Clamp alike. This is like the grafted war gear at home.
Oh yeah, maybe
Yeah.
yeah, sure. That's maybe more of what the art is showing us, right? Although it has batter in the name too. Maybe it's like a
Yeah.
piece of the batter skull they picked up.
Ooh.
Just one blade. And we'll turn that into like a sleeve or a gauntlet or something. I don't know. Any favorite decks from what you've played so far?
I personally have enjoyed white black the most because I like those colors, but also it gives you a good combination of low aggressive early plays and some higher end stuff so you don't get completely run over. Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah. No, sorry, go ahead.
there's a 3/4 for 4 in white, and I don't remember what it's called, but it lets you bounce something to your hand if
yeah.
you get a mite out of it.
Thank you,
Indoctrination Attendant.
There's
That-
a lot of these in people's decks.
This is a great stop sign. It also gets Toxicon if you need to, so like it kind of has to be blocked at some point. And there's the white black signpost uncommon. I bounced one of those with this and felt I was like, I am living the dream.
Yeah.
Bounce your Nim Razor Paladin 2 or whatever, or the black white. What's the black white signpost called? Some other black white?
Evangelist, Vivisection Evangelist.
Right. So this is obviously a real nightmare. If you have those last 2 cards in your deck.
I bounced this back, and then my opponent like scooped. They were like, nope. I can't handle you killing 2 of my things in a row.
Right. So if you haven't caught Vivisection Evangelist yet, congrats. But 3 white black for a 4/4 vigilance with just corrupted, so it doesn't have an ETB if their opponent at all, if the opponent doesn't have corrupted. So you need to get 3 poison counters on them, but when it enters the battlefield, if they have 3 poison counters, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls.
That's very powerful.
Pretty great thing to bounce back to your hand or get back from your graveyard.
If you got little flencing raptors and mites running around and crawling choruses that might trade off for a real card early and still leave a body behind or something like that, this is likely to get turned on.
So this is like the fanciest, coolest thing you can do with that deck, but
yeah, don't pick this highly. Pick it up and I mean,
I think the Evangelist could be a first pick. I don't know. It's a signpost uncommon.
I suppose, but then it just does stone nothing unless you have a very reliable way of getting that poison on.
Yeah, that's fair. But if you get the crawling choruses and the flencing raptors and stuff, you'll get 3 poison counters.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned like 4 colors of removal, and white has great removal too. Yeah. Ossification's
so good.
Is it the uncommon? Because there's a common and an uncommon for 1 and a white enchantment, remove a creature. There's a pacifism at common, and then there's this exile card at uncommon. So this is like a Journey to Nowhere. 1 and a white, enchant basic land you control. When it ETBs, exile target creature or planeswalker and opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. But you put it on a basic land, so I don't even know what in the set can. You can disenchant the ossification.
Yes.
But you're not getting 2 for 1 or anything. So the difference between this and Journey to Nowhere is pretty slim. And then also 1 and a white gets you like a pretty good pacifism with planar disruption.
And because it hits activated abilities too, which is really good.
Yeah, it's actually both these cards are really good for white removal. Like that, like this is like just arrest for 2 mana. Where usually to shut down activated abilities, you had to pay 3 mana. I think before this card, unless you're counting like all the exile removal, like if it's an aura that shuts down activated abilities. I can't think of what the most recent card. Let me know in the comments if there's already been a 2 mana arrest before this one. Appreciate that. So yeah, you in black and white you get like just a fantastic array of removal. Plus, as you were saying, of course, the good mix of early toxic creatures. Cam, do you have a favorite deck you played yet?
Well, to be honest, it was usually whatever my opponent was on.
You just really liked the various things that your opponent showed you that were slaughtering you? Awesome.
I felt very Phyrexian as I admired the purity with which my opponents destroyed me. Methodically, or, in great gouts of violence.
That's sweet. The coolest thing I saw one of my opponents do was... Actually, there's 2, but the one I want to talk about first is just back to that exuberant Fuseling. There's another card that's, I think, only 1 red and puts an oil counter on something that you control every upkeep. It's like an engine or a forge or something like that.
Oh, yes.
What's this one called? It's an uncommon. 1 red. Churning Reservoir. 1 red artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, put an oil counter on another target non-token artifact or creature you control. And then if an oil counter was removed from permanent control this turn, or a permanent with an oil counter was put in a graveyard, you can pay 2 and make a 1/1.
So this combos with your the goblin. It's not Thermo Alchemist. It's a 1/1.
Yeah.
These are like best friends.
Yeah, combos with that one and the other 1 red mana goblin that just gets bigger.
Yeah.
Or your Necrosquito, right? You can just like grow your Necrosquito for free every turn.
Speaking of oil and interesting things, I saw an amazing thing. Is there's a card called Magmatic Sprinter. It's a 3/2, and when it comes in, you put 2 oil counters on something, and then you bounce it back to your hand unless you remove 2 oil counters from something. So it's basically like free oil every turn, and it has haste.
Yeah.
So like it's very powerful.
Yeah, Adam drafted like 6 of these in that second blue-red deck.
I bet.
Yeah, or I think he took 3, but then it's like he could have gotten a lot. There were just a lot of them in the draft, but they were tabling. And so the word on this card is like, it's still up for controversy, it seems like. I'm not sure if everyone agrees that this is a good card, because in a classical like red-green beatdown situation or whatever, you don't usually want to spend 3 mana on your creature every turn. But yeah, it's 2 oil counters that you can keep getting back every turn. So as long as that's worth your 3 mana, this card seems like it's fantastic.
Well, I mean, I saw some very interesting stuff as my opponent came in, put oil counters on his thing that could do damage. Whatever that card is called, and then got in for a quick and easy attack because I could not profitably block a 3/2 at that point. I would have been chumping it, and then brought it back. So he got like 4 oil.
Nice.
So that's great for an oil deck.
Yeah. And, if you just combine it with like a pump spell or something, so that as long as, once you've got 5 mana, maybe the first time you play it has a good attack, and then next turn you do something else. Then the third turn, you can play it and you have 2 mana, so that it just trades with whatever's blocking it. Like you know, you can definitely get your mana's worth out of this card. You set it up right. My favorite game from yesterday was like 25 minutes long. So I've only drafted monocolor decks so far. My green deck went 3-3, but my blue deck, I think, is 6-2. I think I have one more shot to get my blue deck to 7 wins, but it's mono blue, and it's a lot of proliferating oil counters. And I ended up in a mirror match, but my opponent had Unctus, who's like the new Grand Architect.
Grand Meditect.
Meditect, yes, exactly. Unctus. So I had some traditional draw spells, like cards to just like say draw some cards. But the opponent was just looting, and it felt like I was getting buried under the value of them always having their best answer for everything I played for a while. But we were back and forth. I had some removal for his stuff and or their stuff, and I just had like a 2/5 on the ground and a 4/4 in the air, and we were staring at each other. And eventually, after like we had gone through almost the entirety of our deck, I was able to use the Tamiyo's Immobilizer to just tap some of their creatures, forcing them to loot more than they wanted to. And then this was going on for a while. They only have like 8 cards left in their library, and then they conceded after a flunge that was going to like mill them out because their blue creatures, like, it's not a May on Unctus. You have to draw a card and then discard a card. So they just didn't have enough cards left in deck time, which is like the total opposite. To put a button on talking about games like this is the weirdest game of Phyrexia All Will Be One I've seen yet, partly because it went until past turn 6. But yeah, that was I've enjoyed the blue cards so far. Just a lot of like cantrips and proliferate and oil counters. The Glistening Seer, I think, for 1 mana is a good include. And then the other one I really liked was we saw a bunch of Glistening Seer from Jim's deck at the PPR, but this is just a Scry Oil 0/3 for 1. And then there's another card that gets oil counters, 1 in a blue for a 1/3. So it always has a point of power. I'm going to forget what this one's called, but it's a common.
Oh, Ichor Synthesizer.
The
Yeah, this card's really annoying.
Yeah, so it doesn't start with an oil counter, but it gets an oil counter whenever you cast a non-creature spell. And then if it has 4 or more oil counters, so that takes a while. But then it becomes a 3/3 unblockable. So that's pretty hot. And, you know, you can cast non-creature spells at instant speed. So sometimes you'll trick your opponents into making bad attacks. If you can, like, cast 2 spells, or, like, the spell has proliferate. And then the jewel of this deck, like, the reason the blue deck was winning as much as it is that I had 3 Trawler Drakes, which is, like, kind of like the new, what was it called? From Ikoria, 1 red, 1 blue. Durant, the Perfect Pet. Bringing the name of this card. Sorry, it's like a really important Izzet card. Anyways, it's a 2 mana 1/1 that just has like prowess with +1/+1 counters instead of I want to say Zephyr Drake. That's wrong. Sprite Dragon. Is that right?
That sounds familiar. Yeah, Sprite Dragon.
Anyways, so Trawler Drake, thank you. Yeah. So similarly to Sprite Dragon, Trawler Drake, two generic and a blue for a 0/0 Phyrexian Drake with flying, enters with an oil counter and gets +1/+1 for each oil counter, just like the Necrosquito. But whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put an oil counter on Trawler Drake. So being able to play this and then cast like the instants that have proliferate and draw you a card, or put a poison counter on your opponent, very good times.
Yep.
Just make 8/8 Trawler Drakes, kids. If your opponent's Boros decks don't kill you before you can.
Delicious.
Yeah.
Well, greasy, oily. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, if you want to get yourself some greasy, oily cards that are also delicious,
Yeah.
why not head on over to cardkingdom.com/LRR?
Yeah. And you tell them we sent you, and they'll send you a button, and it says a pox upon the auto tapper.
Dare you auto tap? That's the other thing about going monocolor. The auto tapper couldn't get me at all yesterday.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
All my
nice.
lands were perfect.
The biggest brain.
Yeah.
But just in general, I wanted to say, like, so far, I've not been winning with this format a lot, but I've been losing in ways that intrigue me and make me want to play more.
Excellent.
That's kind of where I'm at with it. Like, I don't like losing, but I'm losing in ways that I feel I could use to kill my opponents.
Nice.
So, I mean, yeah. I've seen a lot of people say that this format is bad after playing with it for a day.
It's confusing and hard.
I think it's a challenging format.
Yes.
my theory on it right now is that my hypothesis is that it's challenging. It may yet prove to be bad, but I don't know. I want to keep playing with it, which is more than I can say for some other formats.
Exactly right. Oh, excuse me. I've enjoyed it, even though I have done worse than anybody else here. Because, I like learning new things. I like figuring things out. This has been tremendously helpful to me to sort of get an idea of what cards you guys are running. Because I feel like I understand the deck archetypes and what I'm supposed to do. I'm just not picking the right cards to do it. Which is, we'll figure it out. We'll get there. If this was helpful, let us know in the comments below. And tell us what cool things that you have discovered, or how you've gotten run over and demoralized. Whatever works for you. All right. Well, I think this is about wraps it up for this episode of Tap Tap Concede. Thank you so much to James, who's been running the board. Thank you so much, Cameron, for being here. Nelson.
Thanks to our Patreon subscribers as well.
Yep.
Patreon.com/loading ready run. Really appreciate the constant support you give us.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I've been Kathleen. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.